welcome to today's webinar, English Education in a Workplace Context, Employer-Sponsored Programs that Deliver Results. Our presenter and sponsor today is Katie Brown with NGen. She is the founder and Chief Education Officer of NGen, a public benefit company focused on leveraging technology to enable immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages with the English skills they need for meaningful careers. She has a PhD in second language acquisition from the University of Maryland, and she's been a classroom teacher, an assistant professor, and a research scientist. She spent over 20 years teaching languages, researching how to teach languages, and or teaching people how to teach languages in various settings around the world. Katie lectures and writes about all things related to language learning and educational technology. You can welcome Katie by saying hello in the chat box, letting us know where you're calling in from today. If you have questions during her presentation, you can submit those in the Q&A box. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, but yes, please put your name and where you're from in the chat box. And if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section and we will get to them. There already look like there's some Q&As. The chat box is disabled. It says chat is disabled. James, can you undisable the chat?
Yeah, let me check on that.
And can you enable the closed captions? Do you mind? Hopefully we're getting this all taken care of. Yep, I think the chat is all, let's see. We have some participants with their hands raised. 3 participants are raising their hands. Okay, so live transcription has been enabled and hopefully the chat box is working and we will get going. If anybody has a question, I don't see anything in the chat though. Let's see. I'm going to try something in the chat. Hello, everyone. All right, I think the chat is working. Chat is still disabled. Nope, it's disabled.
All right, I'm going to work on it from behind the scenes.
Okay, James is going to work on the chat and I'm going to work on our presentation. And if you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A. We will let you know when we think the chat is enabled and we'll just get started. So I'm really excited about today's webinar and talking about English learning in a workplace context. I'm going to do a little introduction to language learning and what makes learning language different from learning other things. Then we'll talk about why workplaces make a ton of sense from a language learning perspective. And then I want to get into some practical models that work and how to measure outcomes. I'm going to save time for questions at the end of the presentation, but if you have them as I'm going, please put them into the Q&A. I have another colleague here with me, Patrick, who will be able to answer some questions as we're going along. And he'll let me know if there's something that I should answer live. So 3 participants have raised their hands and I would love for you to let me know why. Oh, good. Someone's writing to someone else in the chat. Yes, so it's working. Perfect. Thanks, James. So if you've raised your hand, you can put your question into the Q&A or you can put it into the chat. Yes, I'm going to share the presentation afterwards and I will answer all of your questions as we go along. You already heard all about me. The one thing I'll tell you that was not in my bio is that I founded NGen with the mission to remove English as a barrier for immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages after spending about 25 years working with this population of learners. And I'm excited to talk to you today about how to help learners get the English skills they need for careers with family-sustaining wages. Right now, there are 74,000 Afghan refugees who are here in the United States or on their way. We're going to have refugees from Ukraine coming. We have had refugees from all over the world. And we know that workers without English skills earn 15 to 25% less than those who do speak English, even if they have degrees, credentials, and skills from their home countries. By 2030, 97% of net workforce growth will be immigrants and their children. As adult educators, you are all probably aware of the number of speakers of other languages that we have in the United States who are looking for English skills and also looking for career and credential programming. But I will tell you that over the last few years, the interest of employers in this population of learners has changed. And it's because we have a historic disparity right now between jobs that are available and people who are qualified to fill those jobs. And with 97% of net workforce growing of immigrants and their children filling the future of work, we need to help people get English skills, and it's becoming imperative for employers to be part of the solution. We see this across industries. Nearly 1/4 of workers in the manufacturing industry is aged 55 or over, which means they're retiring at quite a clip, and we need to help create the talent pipelines to fill those jobs. Healthcare is an industry that was experiencing a crisis before the COVID-19 pandemic, which has only hastened the speed with which employees and workers are retiring, leaving the field. And it's become increasingly clear that having communities of care reflect the people who live in them is important. So helping immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages get the English skills they need for careers in allied healthcare not only helps fill open roles, but it helps create bilingual healthcare workers, which we know are critical to healthy outcomes. The food service industry is another place where employers are starting to think about their immigrant workforce. The hospitality industry in general is struggling to recruit and retain employees. Nationwide, immigrants make up 22% of the hospitality workforce, and helping immigrants and refugees get English skills allows them to be promoted from within this industry, creating more opportunity. The future of work is here. It's in renewable energy, healthcare, and data and technology. So when we're thinking about adult education and preparing the workers and learners that we have now for these jobs of the future, we can't afford to overlook immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages. And workplace-based programs are often excellent ways to help people get the English skills they need for these jobs. There are more than 11 million jobs right now for the 6 million unemployed adults in the United States. We have 2 million immigrants here who are either unemployed or underemployed because they don't have the English skills they need to do the work that they've been trained to do. Despite this, enrollment of English language learners in adult education programs nationally continues to drop. Why is that? Well, we know that English is the enabling skill for integration and opportunity, but as a country, we meet the needs of only 4% of our adult English learners. Why is that? Well, it's because the way we've historically taught English doesn't work very well for especially working adults. It's outdated, it's ineffective, and it's completely unscalable. I have a picture here of an old-fashioned classroom because this is the way that most adult education programs tend to approach English learning. They require in-person instruction. There are barriers of time and money that preclude attendance in these classes. And there's a massive disconnect between research and practice. ESL students often find themselves in programs that are designed around the idea that you need to learn ESL 1 before ESL 2, before ESL 3, before ESL 4, on and on and on and on, when we know that this isn't based in any actual research. Most Americans will tell you that they took 5 years of Spanish and they can't say anything. And it's because the way we approach language instruction in the United States is based on outdated models, and it doesn't work. It means that most people tend to think of English skills as an insurmountable obstacle, but it's just not true. We know based on decades of research how to help people get English language skills rapidly, and how to tie those English language skills to adults' real world needs. I'm going to tell you all about it. First, I'm going to go up to the Q&A. I think there's a few questions. No, there are no questions. Perfect. So learning a language is different from learning a content area. You're acquiring a skill. You're not studying something, which means adult language learners need to use the language that they're learning to accomplish real tasks. If you took a bunch of researchers and you put them all into a room and you asked them to, they would very happily spend the rest of their lives arguing over why the one little thing that they've studied is different from the one little thing that someone else studied. But the truth is that if you filter out all of that noise, what it comes down to is that for language learning to work, people need access to input. They need to see multiple rich examples of the language that they're learning. They need output, or the opportunity to produce the language themselves. They need to be able to interact, and they need feedback on what they're doing. A language learning program will not be successful without those 4 building blocks. And it turns out that the workplace is often a great place for learners to get the real world authentic practice that they need to be successful language learners. Task-based language teaching is a pedagogic approach to language instruction that's centered on the needs of adults. And what it does is it organizes instruction around the concept of tasks rather than linguistic concepts or communicative functions. So instead of thinking, today is Monday, and on Monday I'm going to teach the third person hypothetical conditional, what you do is you think, I have a class of learners who want to get careers in allied healthcare. So I'm going to give them content that supports the English skills they need for those career training credentials. The other really important thing about language learning, and especially adult language learning, is that the right thing is different for everyone. So a fixed curriculum with one-size-fits-all activities and a set plan for what has to happen is a very inefficient and often ineffective way of reaching learners, because each learner is going to be interested in something different, and they're going to developmentally be in a different place in their language learning journey. They're going to need to work on different skills at a different proficiency level. So the best language learning programs leverage technology to deliver differentiated instruction, so each learner is getting exactly what they need at the right time so that they can work on the language skills that they're developmentally ready for and that are tied to their real world goals and needs. So how do we do that? How do we build a better model? I'm going to look through here and see. Can I repeat those 4 components again? Yes, somebody asked me to repeat the 4 components that we need for language learning to take place. We need input, we need output, we need interaction, and we need feedback. And I will share the presentation after this is over, and there'll be a recording of it available as well, so you'll be able to get all of this information. So how do we do that? If we know all of these things are true for language learning, it needs to be personalized. It needs to be based on real world authentic tasks. It needs to be tied to learners' goals. And instruction needs to be responsive so that learners have those 4 building blocks: input, output, interaction, and feedback. How do we build a better model? Well, as it turns out, workplaces are places where all of those components take place. If you think about a workplace-based English program or a workplace-based language program, training is tied to real workplace needs. I have here images of people sitting in a restaurant, but you can imagine a customer service situation or a pharmacy. You can imagine any place where workers need to communicate in English. If they're working on the English skills they need to communicate in the workplace, they get the opportunity to interact, to get feedback, and to get lots and lots of practice. When you're tying an English program to a workplace-based program, the lessons are inherently engaging, relevant, and motivating because you're giving your learners the tools they need to do their jobs. And they can then go use those tools to consolidate their knowledge while they're working. When you're working in a flipped classroom model and you're using technology-mediated instruction, all of the activity and performance is tracked so that supervisors, teachers, stakeholders, caseworkers can see how learners are performing, what they need help with, and how to support them. And their English skills are rapidly developed. So workplaces make sense. If you want to get a workplace language learning program started, the very first thing you need to do is begin with a needs analysis, because the language that learners need to learn is going to differ workplace by workplace. One mistake that I've seen made over the years is an employer will hire a local adult education provider to come in and do a workplace-based program. And they'll come in with the syllabus that they've used in their face-to-face classes at their institution for the last 10 years. It'll be called ESL 2 or intermediate ESL or high beginning ESL. It'll start out with introductions, then it might go to writing a descriptive paragraph. They might change the title of it, so it's called English for the workplace or English for manufacturing, but there's nothing different about what they're doing. They're coming in and doing a one-size-fits-all ESL curriculum, maybe with a few vocabulary words related to that sector in a workplace. This isn't taking advantage of the benefits that a workplace-based program offers. This is just taking a traditional model and trying to shoehorn it into a workplace. So if you want to actually build a successful workplace-based program, you need to start out with a needs analysis. And what does that mean? Who is learning English? Who are these workers? What is their level of English proficiency? Why do they need to learn English? What do they need to do with it? Are they going to need to read, write, listen, or speak? What tasks do they need to be able to complete in English? These are all initial questions that you need to work with the workplace sponsor to get answered to build a program that's effective. And ultimately, can you find real examples of the language they will use? This is critically important because most publishers don't use authentic English or authentic materials in their curriculum. They hire curriculum writers and designers who sit down and think, oh, I need to have content related to the trades. What are the keywords people will need? And they sit and they try to think of what those are. Well, we know from decades of research that course designers and curriculum developers are not experts in those career fields. The only way to get meaningful, authentic content for learners in a workplace-based program is to use materials from the workplace itself. And then in a workplace-based program, you want to leverage technology to do what computers do best, so people can do what humans do best. And what does this mean? It means you can reach more learners. Workplaces have logistical constraints. They might not have classrooms. They have competing job schedules. Learners are there working. So don't make them all come together at the same time after their shift or before their shift 3 days a week. Let them work in a flexible, blended way where when they have time, on their way to work, on their way home from work, in the evening, on the weekends, they can work on their program and get the support they need from the workplace. Removing barriers to access. Technology can let you individualize instruction. It's the single best thing that technology can do. We know that one-size-fits-all curricula don't work. They take forever, and it's very rare that you're teaching what every learner actually needs. Technology can help you differentiate instruction so you can actually meet the needs of all of your learners. When you're using technology to teach, you can measure progress and outcomes, which means you can have a rapid and efficient training transitions. It lets you work in a competency-based way so that as soon as learners and workers are demonstrating that they have the English skills to move on to the next job, they're able to do so. And it lets you reach more learners faster. I've said a lot of stuff about technology, But I want to point out that you cannot overlook digital literacy. If I had been giving this webinar 2 years ago, even more than that at this point, I would have had a lot of people raising their hands saying, but wait, my English language learners can't use technology for learning. They don't have email addresses. They don't have computers. And the truth is A, that's not true, but B, that means you need to start with digital skills and you need to integrate digital skills with technology. The thing about learning a language is that you cannot decouple language from content. You need to use some content to teach the language. So you might as well start with content that's important, like digital literacy skills. It might be more work up front to make sure that learners can use and access relevant tools, but that work will pay off because it's necessary for digital equity. But also it's helping to prepare your learners and workers for jobs that are all going to require technology. Employers are seeing the benefits of workplace-based programs. This quote comes from the CEO of Chipotle. Of those enrolled in our educational assistance program, 85% are crew members. We've seen a retention rate that is 3.5 times higher among employees enrolled in the program, and crew members participating are 7.5 times more likely to move into a management role within the organization. So taking a step back, I'm explaining why language learning makes so much sense for the workplace. And it makes sense for the workplace because it's a great place to reach learners and workers who are not served by existing models, who don't have access to instruction, and because they're in an English-rich environment to work on their emerging language skills. But at the same time, employers are seeing the value of building workplace-based programs because it's helping with recruitment and retention. And it's also helping them to develop internal talent pipelines. So it's a win-win. When you want to build a workplace-based program, I've created this operations checklist. Here's some things that you can do in order to make sure that the program is effective. Because one question that you will get from employers is, wow, this sounds great, but it seems like so much work. How do we implement it? Well, here's some ways that you can implement a workplace-based program. The first thing you have to do is identify participants who would benefit from the English skills. Next, you need to have an internal champion or program manager. Somebody has to care that the workplace-based program is effective. You need to decide if the training should be done at home, at work, or both. Make sure that employees have access to mobile devices or computers or tablets. And then you need to determine your metrics for measuring success, because these are going to be different workplace to workplace. Some places it might be improved performance and morale. Other places it might be recruiting participants for new training or apprenticeship programs, developing and cross-training employees, helping employees use a benefit, helping people become eligible for promotion. Those are all potential metrics for success. I went into this a little bit when I talked about the needs assessment, but I put together another checklist here because when you're thinking about building a workplace-based program, you want to make sure you know what jobs the employees have. And then you want to find specific examples of the English needs of learners in their current roles and learners' future roles, and then get examples of materials. These are all things that an individual adult education provider can do, or you could work with a content partner like NGen that does all of this work for every sector we support and every type of employer. Partnerships between local education providers, employers, with an adaptive platform like ours are really an effective and efficient way to increase your reach and increase your enrollment by reaching out to local employers and finding them content that makes sense for their needs, supporting it with instructional models that you already have. Here's an example of one employer and some of the content that supports workers in their workplace. This is Maine Health is one of the largest employers in the state of Maine. They have a workplace-based program helping their environmental service workers get English skills, starting with things like an overview of policies and regulations in the workplace and employee safety responsibilities. This particular program has seen environmental service workers get the English skills they need to be eligible for further training and advancement within that particular workplace. I have a video here from Maine Health that talks about one particular worker in this program.
I'm so happy to come to work. Everyone's coming into their career at different places. I used to be an executive secretary. When I first come in United States, I have to start from the bottom to feed my kids. She originally was in environmental services at Maine Medical Center. We met with Hyatt, get a sense of what she was looking for. I like to help people. How are you? The barrier was the English. You let her know about a healthcare office certificate training program.
They offer a lot of developmental services so that they have a career, not just a job.
Now that I'm getting a little bit better for the English, there's a lot of opportunities. I want to be a medical assistant. I have 3 kids and I want them to see that even me, I did. You young, you can do. I think that Maine Medical supports everybody.
When you see someone achieve what they thought that they couldn't achieve, for me, that makes my day.
It's like a dream. I don't want to wake up.
So I'm going to actually make sure that's still paused. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came in while I was finishing up that last section. One of them was a recommendation for good reading or textbook on this topic. I can share some resources afterwards. I'm happy to do that. Another question is about students who have no idea what work path they eventually want. And is there a generalized suggestion of skills usable in all workplaces? That's a great question. The way we think about this is that there are some English language skills that are more general to the workplace. And we've divided them up into beginning skills, intermediate skills, and advanced skills. Things like greetings and introductions in a workplace, filling out basic forms in a workplace. Those happen across workplace contexts, and they are things that English learners need. Then there are very sector-specific topics, and those would depend on the type of work that your learners want to be able to do. One thing that I've seen happen over and over again is that English language learners often they are not given an introduction to what it means to learn a new language and how they need to have a sense of learner agency in order to be successful. So many English language learners come to a program and think, I'm just going to sit here and this teacher is going to help give me English. And that's not how it works. Like, learning a language is hard work. We spent the first 20 minutes of this presentation talking about it. Learners actually have to use their language skills. They need to be interested in what they're doing. And a lot of them need some orientation to that at the beginning of their language learning program. A lot of the work that you do with beginning learners can be around career exploration. So general workplace skills, general communication skills, professional skills, helping with resumes, creating LinkedIn profiles, practicing for job interviews, those are all things that learners can work on regardless of what career field they end up going into. But they can also work on the English related to specific careers to figure out what careers are even interesting to them. Bringing in as much authentic career content into your programs will only help your learners. And then the last question is, this is more in the weeds, but in the California adult ed system, how do you offer in a way that is open access versus a service just for a particular employer industry, which is more contract education? So I think it's really an interesting question, and I sort of got to it when I was talking about general workplace skills. If you rethink your workplace English model and you move to something that is more flexible, more task-based, and more tied to learner needs, they can be working in a general ESL model, but working on their own, at their own pace on content that's tied to their ultimate career goals, and making sure that learners understand how that's how the program is working makes sense. And also creating pathways and bridges to IET programs. So you're ESL students, when they get to a specific proficiency level, are often eligible to participate in integrated educational and training programs for specific credentials and workplace skills. Building in a flexible English model to those programs can help you bring some of that sector-specific English to a general purpose ESL program. And I'm happy to get into this more after the presentation or separately if you want to send me a message. All right, let's go back to what I was talking about. So if we want to build a workplace-based model, these are 5 things that need to happen. Somebody needs to own the model, whether it's someone in training, development, employee benefits, somebody at the workplace needs to be in charge of this. You need to think about recruitment differently. Not all learners will know that there's a workplace-based program for them or an employer-sponsored program. So working with the employer to make sure that learners are recruited in a way that's inclusive is important. I mentioned technology once, and I'll mention it again. It can really help you reach more learners who can't access traditional educational structures. Paying attention to transitions is important no matter what. When we think about workforce development, helping people for careers with family sustaining wages, the transitions are tricky. When somebody gets foundational skills, they can get into a credential program. It's important to make sure that handoff works. And again, when someone finishes a credential program, making sure they can get a job is important. That's why bringing employers into these conversations, talking to them about what roles they have open, what kinds of qualifications learners need, what level of English they need to do those jobs is important for building an ecosystem where we can help learners get the skills they need to get into these jobs that already exist. And thinking about program evaluation is critical. Anytime you want to build a workplace-based program, being able to measure whether or not it works is going to put you in a position to scale that program, to sell it to other employers, and to get funding for it. So here are some examples of how this can work. This is a self-paced, autonomous ESL program. This could either take place in a workplace or it could take place in an adult education context. The goal here is that learners are improving their English skills on their own and then moving into credential programs. So in this sample scenario, Rose is a high beginner in English and she wants to begin a CNA program. She uses a platform to improve her English skills, focusing on English for allied healthcare for 2 months. Her level improves to intermediate. She enrolls in a CNA program and she continues to use the platform for support while she's in this program. Here's another one. This is an ESL program with mandatory lab hours. So this is slightly more intervention. Learners are working on their own, but they have a required number of sessions with an instructor. So in this sample scenario, Carlos is a high beginner in English and he wants to begin an IT career. He uses the platform to improve his English skills, focused on IT careers for 12 weeks. He has to attend a weekly open lab to practice his English and check in with an instructor on his progress. His level improves to intermediate. He enrolls in an IT help desk program and he continues using the self-paced ESL program for support. So you can imagine in those open labs that there will be other students on other career pathways with other career goals at other proficiency levels, but they have a place where they can come and get support on their own schedules. The flipped classroom model for multi-level learners is probably the best way to do task-based language teaching at scale. In this case, teachers are going to use learner data to drive in-class activities, and learners move out of the class as they demonstrate competency. So imagine learners enrolling in a workplace ESL program. And I've seen this work both inside of an employer and in an adult education context. Learners outside of class are working on personalized practice that's tied to their level, their interest, and their goals. Instructors can see what learners are doing outside of class so that inside of class, they can build productive collaborative activities, even when learners are at different proficiency levels and on different career pathways. One of the tools you can use to group students is their proficiency level, and another way you can group them is with their career goals. During class, learners are working in small groups and they're working on real world productive tasks, writing and speaking in context related to the careers that they want to focus on. And then they move into CTE programs as they demonstrate competency. And then an IET program where learners are actually enrolled in a career or a credential program, but they're using personalized English instruction to support their learning is a way to actually take care of that transition. So in this scenario, learners are enrolled in an IT help desk certificate program. Outside of class, they're working on the English lessons that are tied to the course content and objectives. They have access to an ESL teacher for synchronous or asynchronous support, and that they complete this help desk certificate program while at the same time they're improving their English skills. They're getting foundational English support for the career pathway that they're on. So the last section of my presentation is on measuring success. I said evaluation is really important, and I want to make sure we talk about how to measure the effectiveness of these programs. I think I have one other question, maybe I have here. Most of the ESL educators are part-time teachers who do not have incentives as benefits, Social Security, so retention is a hard issue for the community schools to take care in order to follow all these wonderful ideas of this webinar. I mean, it's true that many ESL teachers are part-time. One of the things about what I'm suggesting here, though, is that it's actually designed to make things easier for teachers. Because if you're using an adaptive platform, if you can get your organization, your county, your school district, your school to invest in a platform that will deliver personalized learning to the students, then teachers have a lot of their time freed up to work on collaborative activities with those students, knowing that the students are getting the right practice at the right time with the right materials. But the issue of teacher funding and program development is one that we face in education across the country in pretty much every context. So how do we measure success? Let's see. This is a research-based framework for measuring success that I put together based on a lot of data on how to demonstrate whether or not learners have achieved their language learning goals. The single biggest predictor of success in any type of skill acquisition is time on task. So measuring overall engagement in a program and also spaced practice. So how often do learners log in? How often are they working on their English skills? Spaced practice is much better than massed practice, meaning working on your English skills 4 times a week for 20 minutes at a time is a lot better than doing it once a week for an hour and a half. Then you want to measure proficiency improvement, yes, but that's not the holy grail. And once you get to intermediate, you will often have learners who stay at intermediate. So you also want to measure their mastery of the language and the content that they're learning. You want to look at stakeholder feedback for any program. What are learners saying? What are teachers saying? What are employers saying when we're talking about a workplace-based program? And then you want evidence of real-world success, continued education, pay raises, promotions, new job offers, when we're talking especially about employer-focused programs, community engagement and confidence. So let's look at some data. This is data from thousands of learners who we worked with last year. 92% of our learners improved their average proficiency score. You can see some of them maintained their level. When you're talking about language learning, maintenance is positive. If learners are not working on their language skills, they will attrite or the skills will disappear. We see some learners improved a level. We see some learners improved multiple levels. We always have some percentage of learners whose test scores go down. That happens in any sort of testing scenario. We like to see this stay around 90%. When I look at achievement tests, this is on almost 30,000 different tests, and those different tests were on 580 different units, things like the English you need for a career in early childhood education, or to get a commercial driver's license, or general workplace skills. And on average, learners' test scores were right around 80%. So they were understanding the language that they were learning. I chose some de-identified data from an employer partner so you can see how this works in a workplace-based context. This was almost 2,000 learners with a particular employer in a workplace-based English program, 93% improving their average proficiency score, completing 452 unique units of study. Again, that's 452 different kinds of English that these nearly 1,800 learners were doing. And their average test score was about an 81%. So being able to measure the success of your program, especially if you're using a digital tool, is important. And any tool you use should be able to give you this kind of data. In addition, we survey our learners to get at some of that stakeholder feedback. And you can see that 80% of the learners who responded to our survey reported that the platform helped them with their career goals, improved workplace communication, pay raises, promotions, and job offers, being more likely to stay in their jobs. 90% of the learners reported that the platform helped them with their social goals. And you can see learners writing things in like, I've greatly improved my communication in my community to understand native speakers. I can even take my parents to the doctor now. This is an example of a workplace-based program of a learner who started with a very low level of English proficiency and was able to improve her level of English and get a promotion in her workplace. We get feedback like, I'm confident to schedule job interviews. I can read professional materials faster. People can understand me better. And that's because our focus is on giving learners the real world English skills they need to be able to get the jobs they want to get, and also to help their kids with their homework and take their parents to the doctor. When you're thinking about increasing enrollments by working with employers, these are some of the benefits to a workplace-based program that you can use to talk about potential workplaces in your communities. It can help support a workplace's diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. It can help develop, engage, and retain high potential employees. It can eliminate English skills as a barrier to career advancement. It allows employers to promote bilingual employees to supervisory and training roles. It enhances workplace safety and company culture. It improves team morale, and it also opens up new and often overlooked talent pools. Often workplaces want to have language programs and they don't know where to start. And that's why partnerships with adult education programs can really drive these benefits for an employer. So to recap, there is a massive disconnect between ESL programs and career and technical programs, and we have an untapped pool of potential immigrant and refugee workers. A technology-enabled competency-based model can help you reach more learners and reach them more efficiently. It lets you tailor programs to English learners' needs and goals. Employers want to upskill their workers, but they don't know how to do it. And so adult educators can play a critical role in helping to get English language learners the skills they need to get these jobs in the workplace. And I saved a few minutes. I think we have 10 or 15 more minutes to see if there are any more questions. Please feel free to post these in the Q&A. Can I give examples of the adaptive platforms that I mentioned? Yes. Well, one of them is NGen. Our whole platform is designed to offer adaptive needs-based instruction. And then if you're looking for adaptive platforms that you can use to develop your own curricula and your own tools, there are lots of open source material. There are technology platforms that you can use to create adaptive activities if you have your own content and curricula. You can use things that are as simple as quizzes that you build in Google Sheets to creating web-based activities using something like Lessonly. The goal, though, is to make sure that the content that you're offering to learners is tailored to their interests and their needs. What other questions can I answer? So would you recommend using this platform as an additional resource for students or as an actual curriculum for teaching a class? That is a fabulous question, and I'm going to try to answer it in a way that is comprehensive. So the NGen platform can be used for both. I spent 10 years working in higher education, getting pitched materials by vendors that made no sense. So when I left higher ed and I designed and built this technology, I did it because I wanted to help solve the problems of English language learners, the teachers who work with them, and the institutions that support them. So what we offer is used in different ways in different places, depending upon the needs of the learners and the instructors. It works as a standalone resource for some places where they have no instructors or where they have volunteer teachers. It can be used in a flipped classroom model to give learners individualized instruction where they're working on other common workplace-based themes in classes. It can be used for learners who are getting academic readiness skills because they want to be in an academic program. So it really depends upon the problem that you're trying to solve. What I will say, though, is that making any resource available to learners as a nice to have doesn't work. If you want your learners to use anything, to use textbooks, to use websites, to use this digital platform or a different one, it needs to be incorporated into their learning plan. And it needs to be part of what they're asked to do for course credit or whatever kind of structured program you're offering. Hopefully that was helpful. Is NGen a subscription-based program? Who pays for this? Companies or partners? NGen is a subscription-based program. It's paid for by companies that are supporting their English learners in the workplace. It's paid for by adult education programs using all sorts of different funding models, from grants to WIOA funding to SNAP funding. It's paid for by tuition models at some institutions. It's paid for with government dollars from state governments. It really depends upon the instructional ecosystem, but you can think about it as basically a curriculum and technology provider integrated together that can help you deliver personalized language learning at scale. How much instruction should be workplace content without excluding non-workplace topics? Some students have said workplace specific instruction is too restrictive. So I think that the answer to this question is really that instruction is best when learners get the materials that are most interesting and relevant to them, which means learners in the same class often using all different materials. You can imagine an intermediate ESL class where students are working on, and you have 20 students, those students are reading 20 different things. They're listening to 20 different lectures. They're working on 20 different activities, because what's right for one learner is not going to be right for another learner. The goal is to get them as much practice with English as possible. And to the extent that you can differentiate instruction, you're going to be meeting the individualized needs of the learners. How do I get this information to our program director working on building IET? You can reach out to us. My colleague Patrick is here in the chat and he can put in contact information so that you can reach out to us if you would like some information afterwards. I noticed you mentioned once students are at a high beginning level of English, then do a support course. For very beginning students, especially for the older generation, do you recommend doing general English or still do something with workplace instruction? So I really don't think there is any such thing as general English. What happens in a general English course is you often have a textbook with dialogues that make no sense. You can teach very beginners with anything. You just need to teach them with the simplest language possible to do those things. So, for example, if you have a group of older learners who have zero English skills, figure out what they want to be able to do in English. Do they want to download email on their phones? Do they want to be able to watch videos in English? Do they want to be able to sign up for a Gmail address? And start there. Start with something real that your learners want to be able to accomplish. And then go from there, rather than starting with a predetermined lesson on simple present, which is what happens in most textbooks. I will say that the domain of English that you use with very beginning learners is more restrictive, and you're not going to start with a complex technical manual for taking apart a carburetor. But you can start with something that's different from teaching people the names of the animals at the zoo or reading dialogues that were scripted in a textbook. You can start with watching people introduce themselves at a business meeting and using real examples of those introductions and having learners practice doing that too. Another question, our area has many warehouses, which are the main employers of recent immigrants. How would you suggest maximizing the efforts of a small number of ESL teachers for a large pool of potential students spread out over a number of companies with separate warehouses? That is a fabulous question. And the answer to it is to use something like our platform with your teachers. What we can do is help teachers reach more students. If you get a group of warehouse employers who understand that if they invest in ESL resources for their workers, it will benefit not just the workers, but also benefit them. You can bring learners together and get them in a group, have them with the teacher learn about a flipped model that they're going to do some work at home and they're going to have access to the teacher for office hours. Have teachers go and work with learners in small groups during drop-in office hours. You can build a really effective flipped model with a small number of teachers if learners are getting the bulk of their instruction from an adaptive web-based platform outside of class time, and then using the time with the teachers to get help, to get feedback, to work on writing tasks, to work on their productive skills. Setting up programs like that is what I've done for my whole life. And so if you are interested in talking to us about how that could work, please reach out after the webinar. I'd love to talk to you. What about pre-literacy students or students without literacy skills in their first language? That is the hardest group of learners to reach by far. And you do have to start with basic literacy skills. If you can tie those literacy skills to real tasks, it's still better. Have learners learn how to type in email addresses, how to type in passwords, recognizing letters on a keyboard. Those are all real things that they will be able to do from their phones. It will be the very first step of learning English literacy. But those pre-beginner, pre-literacy students, you need to bring them together in person if you can at first and help them get those basic building blocks of digital skills, starting with getting email addresses. We have a whole pre-beginner literacy program that's designed to get learners digital skills and literacy skills together. And a lot of it is focused around keyboards on phones and creating email addresses and passwords. What is the flipped model exactly? Well, I only have a couple of minutes and I just gave an hour-long lecture on flipped models a few weeks ago. Essentially, a flipped classroom means that you take out what the teacher does in class isn't really predetermined. It's not a teacher lecturing like I've been doing for the last hour, which is the worst way to teach adults. It's the teacher facilitating learners getting real world practice in the classroom. So it's flipped because the teaching and the learning happens outside of class. Learners are using materials that are decided in advance for them or adaptive. They're working in a platform that's giving them English lessons or math lessons or whatever at their level on a topic that's interesting to them, that adapt based on their needs. And then when they come into the classroom with the teacher, they're working on collaborative activities where the learners are producing the language themselves and getting feedback from the teachers. So it's flipped because instead of the outdated model of the teacher as the expert delivering the content in the classroom, learners explore and learn content on their own, at their own pace, at their own level, then come back together when the teacher can help them with the content they've gotten outside of class. What formal test materials are used to measure student progress? Well, in the case of NGen, we have a proprietary proficiency assessment that's been tested on millions of learners all over the world that we use to get global proficiency. And then learners, in addition, are completing achievement tests based on the content that they're seeing. We work with programs across the country that use other standardized tests. And so we have lots of examples of learners who improve their NRS levels on CASAS or Best Plus as part of a program that's funded through the local library that are also using our platform. I think I might have time for one more question. If anybody else wants to pop one into the Q&A. Okay. Well, this was a great group. Thank you so much for all of your questions, for your attention on a Friday afternoon in July. I appreciate it. And if you'd like more information or there's any other questions we can answer for you, I know my colleague Patrick has been in the chat and you can reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Katie, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this Friday afternoon. What a way to end the week. It was a busy webinar. We had a lot of participants today, so thank you very much. If everybody could just take a minute to fill out the poll question on your screen, I would appreciate it. And I think Katie mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that this will be posted on coabe.org within about 24 hours or so after the completion today. So it'll be there available. Everyone will get a certificate of completion emailed to them as well. And with that, I hope everybody has a great rest of the afternoon and a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.